My name is Nelda Spell Mitchell. You can remember my name because it's a sentence. Nelda Spell Mitchell. I have 2 books here. Have I told y'all this? This is stories that happened to me and my husband. My husband is Dennis Mitchell. And some of these stories we experienced. Some my parents experienced, some Dennis's parents experienced. But they're stories that were told over and over when we'd have a chance to sit in the swing under the shade tree. And as time went along, I would write them down. And we got them in books. It was too much to put in one, so we got Volume 1 and Volume 2. You have to get both volumes to get all the stories. And if you'll call Mr. Amazon, he will send them right to your door. And they make wonderful gifts. If you've got somebody you don't know what in the world to give them, you get them both of these books and they will enjoy having them. And then I've started reading some of them and putting them on YouTube. So tell your friends to check with YouTube and you can hear me read some of the stories. I hope that you enjoy them. The story I'm going to read today is about the Mitchell's flat truck tires. Now there's a picture of an old truck with men standing around it. That's the truck we're talking about. But the picture was not made the day of the story. I don't know how the picture happened to be made or exactly who all the men were around it, but I found the old picture and I was told that was the truck. So I'm going to read you about the flat tires. It was spring, school was out, and the crops were ready to be planted. And Mr. Beery's truck this day was piled with kinfolks and friends, and they were going 70 miles to Stone County, which is south of us, and to go visit kinfolks and to go fishing and to get cottonseed. He had bought this truck to use as a school bus and as a farm truck. The last day of school, he would back under the shed. He would put supports on each side of it. He'd unbolt the school bus body and jack it up just a little bit so he could drive out from under it. And the school bus body would remain on those supports all summer. And then he would bolt it back down to use in the winter time, in the school time. Well, this day of the story, they were going to visit Uncle Eli and Aunt Anna Rawls, Uncle Charlie and Aunt Lula Rawls and their families, and several Wade families who had recently moved down to Stone County. Mr. Beery drove the truck and one of the men rode with him up front. On the flatbed, sitting around it, were Miss Ruthie, Dennis's mother was Miss Ruthie, and their children, Tony, Alma, Eunice, and Rex, and Breland Knight. Breland Knight's mother was Mr. Beery's sister, and she had died, and he was an orphan that Mr. Beery and Miss Ruthie raised. Uncle George and Aunt Virgie Ross, Mr. Hannon Wade and Mr. Lucian Wade, and their families and several friends, one of whom were Wiley Gigger, were on that truck as well. No one can remember just how many were on this trip, but it didn't matter. Time was free and hospitality was warm, and the more people, the more fun they would have. And they sat all around the edge of the truck. All the roads were gravel. Even Highway 49 was gravel, except the streets in downtown Hattiesburg. They were paved, but every other road, street, highway, they were all gravel at this time. And dust just coated them. But that's the way it was, and they didn't really mind. Some of the ladies and older girls sat in the middle of the truck on quilts holding the small children. All the rest of them sitting all around the edge with their legs hanging off. These kinfolks in Stone County lived about 10 miles east of Wiggins in the big level community where the land was level and so pretty. Once when they got there, the men folks, including all the boys that were potty trained, got to go fishing. They got back on the flatbed and drove a few miles more to Black Creek to fish. The women, girls, and untrained little boys were left to visit house to house. After 2 nights, the party headed back north, the 70 miles north. It was early in the morning, so they would be home for lunch, and there was no use to carry any food with them because they'd make it by noon. Well, when they got as far from Wiggins as they could, and they were still a far piece from Hattiesburg, a back tire went flat. Well, it was one of those days when the sun comes up hot. All the ladies had on bonnets tied under their chin. The men had on straw hats. These just kept their brain from boiling. But they were not cooling devices. There was nothing to do but to get off the truck, find a shade tree, and wait till the tire was fixed. Having spare tires was unheard of. They were a waste of money because there was a chance that a spare tire might never be used. And nothing was bought in the 1930s unless there was a specific need and there was no way free to solve the problem. Someone remembered that there was a country store a few miles up ahead. Mr. Bury and some of the men rolled the flat tire to it. He bought patches and patched the inner tube and aired it back up and thanked the Lord it held. Meanwhile, the group under the shade on the ditch bank were entertaining ideas of starvation. Miss Ruthie had a dime of her egg money she had brought along in case of an emergency, and this was it. She gave the dime to Tony and told him to run up to that store and buy a loaf of light bread. He did. This was the first time some of the group had ever tasted of light bread. It was so good. But this loaf of bread did not multiply like the Lord's bread had. It just made them feel more hungry. Well, one of the Wades untied a sack of cabbage he had gotten from his kinfolks and passed it around. Oh, it was so good. Some of the group had never eaten cabbage raw for a snack either. Well, the entourage welcomed the dusty breeze when they were moving again. Oh, they were so happy. But the happiness didn't last long. When they were too far from the little store and too far from Hattiesburg, the same tire blew out. Well, there was no alternative but to drive on the flat tire, slowly. Kerflop, kerflop, kerplop, on they went to Hattiesburg. The sun moved up hotter. There was no breeze. Pass the cabbage, please. Mr. Bury said that when they got to Hattiesburg, he would ease by Ben Schimper's scrap place and buy a used tire. As they rattled down the paved street in front of the Methodist Hospital in downtown Hattiesburg, A city slicker young man was strolling down the sidewalk in his starched and ironed white suit and his straw Katie hat. And he stopped and stared in disbelief at the limpid Chevy. And he shouted, "Hey, you got a flat tire." Tony yelled back, "Well, hell, don't you think we know it?" The sun was headed downhill before they left Ben Schimpers. They were home free now. Mr. Beauty blew the soot out of the muffler. They went all the way through seminary. They went all the way through seminary and got all the way to Grandpa Owens' old place north of seminary before that new used tire blew out. They were still nearly 10 miles from home, and that was too far to push that truck. And there was no money to fix a tire if they walked back to seminary. They removed the flat and stuffed it with cottonseed. It worked. In the process of jacking the truck up or down, the jack slipped and mashed Wiley Giger's finger. He didn't lose it, but it was bad enough that he had to give it special attention for a few days. It was time to milk the cows. By the time they got home, they were all so glad. They were all so glad. Even the old mules looked good when they got home late that evening. If you like to look at YouTube, look up our nephew's, now why did I say nephew? Our grandson, Weston Mitchell, has a post on YouTube, and it's called Big South Ranching. And you look it up and you see what all he's got on it, and you read my stories and you buy the books. And I hope you enjoyed this.